All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the House Judiciary Committee for today. I appreciate everybody being here. Um, if you would bow your heads with me, we will, as we always do, begin our session with a word of prayer. Lord, we stop once again in this busy, fast-paced world we live in, and we ask for calm, we ask for peace, we ask for wisdom, most importantly, to do what is best for the people of our state. Give us that ability now as we move forward this morning or afternoon. Bless us and keep us. Amen. And I think it's the afternoon, isn't it, y'all? All right. So the first bill that we will call for today is House Bill 38, which is a complete substitute. And Senator Ligon, I appreciate you being here today. This is also at the request of Representative Don Hogan, and he's in the room. And we'll be able to share with you his request that we pass this. Senator, what I would like to do is tell you what I understand we have before us now, and then I'd like for you to set the chairman straight if I don't have it right. Hold on one second. Okay. Members of the committee, in Georgia, as I understand it, and I may go back 40 years or 30 years, and forgive me if my dates are wrong, but just trying to give you a general idea of what's in front of us. If a county wanted to move away from a sheriff handling all the policing in the county, and they wanted to move to a police department instead, you of course never do away with the county sheriff because he always has the authority over the courthouse and the jail, and that's his constitutional responsibility. But you can, for the most part, remove the policing power over to a police force. Several counties did that. I think it's greater than 10, but less than 20 in the state of Georgia. At some point, the legislature decided, and I think it goes back before my time, more than 20 years, that if counties wanted to continue doing that, that's fine, but you would need a vote of the people to do that. Ever since that vote of the people has been put into place, there may have been one or two that have done it, but I'm just not aware of it. The question arose for the senator and the House member who represent Glenn County. If you want to allow the people to vote to go back to a sheriff, there's no provision in our law to allow for that. They feel like they would like, as I understand it, to pass a local bill, put a referendum on the ballot, and allow the people of Glenn County to decide in their area as to whether or not they would like to have the policing power back with the sheriff rather than a police department. So when they mentioned this to me, I noted that several members of our committee are in counties with police departments. And I said to them, I think it would be my preference, if at all possible, and sometimes it's not, I'd much rather you be able to do this by a local bill, but I know you can't. So I understand what you did is you made that change possible for y'all to pass a local bill to allow your citizens of Glenn County to vote to move the policing power back to a sheriff. But you put a sunset in this general law that we have to pass, basically such that unless somebody else runs a local ad real quickly and does it this session, which I don't think is likely, this is basically going to affect y'all. And if a future legislature wants to come in and allow this question to be opened up wider, we've set a template for them to do it, but they'd have to come back and do it later. Now, that is my understanding of what we have in front of us, Senator Ligon, but I want you to correct me and elaborate because my county doesn't have a police department, so I don't deal with this. I have a sheriff, and he does a good job.
No, Mr. Chairman, you have stated this perfectly. And in fact, if you want to go ahead and move to a vote after your statement, I'm perfectly willing to allow you to do that. But, I'm prepared to give a little background as to the reasons for this if the chair feels it necessary. But you have accurately stated the essence of the bill, and we have worked to tailor this down so that it would only impact Glenn County. And I know that there were some larger counties around the Metro Atlanta area that didn't like this. And so we've addressed that concern, and I feel that we have adequately taken that off the table. And, the circumstances are just such in Glenn County now that this cannot be ignored, and the legislature must step in and allow the people of the county to choose the structure of governance for the exercise of the police power in Glenn County. I cannot tell you how many people have approached me since the Ahmaud Arbery case, and the way that has been handled, was handled by the local police department, to ask that we put this on for a vote.
Along that line, if I may, Senator, on line 24 of the substitute, it says this act shall be repealed by operational law on January the 1st, 2022. So to be consistent with what I understood this to be, y'all have already or have in process your local bill. That would require, I assume, a November question.
Exactly. I filed the local bill on Monday. The ad ran last week.
So
it will be moving. It is moving through the Senate.
So let's say we're now into the 21 session. Once again, a local bill would have to be filed and put on a general election, which would next time would be 22.
Right.
But because this bill sunsets before then, that makes it really, for practical purposes, only apply to y'all, and you're not
Right.
put it directly messing with anybody else that
Right.
has a police department.
Yes, sir.
If they want to do it, they'll have to go through the same process y'all are
That's
going
right.
through now. Okay.
That's correct.
Representative Hogan, I asked you to be in the room because I knew that you had asked for your help with this. There is a microphone right next to you, and I believe that one is number 16. Would you mind if Representative Hogan makes any comments he wants to make?
Yeah, I appreciate his presence here.
Sure.
So.
This situation with the Glenn County Police Department's been going on for some time. We've had informants.
Representative Hogan, they're telling me your mic's not working. Why don't you try coming up to the one right in front of you there behind Miss Oliver, and we'll try and see if we can make it work. Try now that one.
Testing.
This was working. Go ahead.
This situation with the Glenn County Police Department's been going on for a long time. We've had killings by police department, by police officers, of people up in McIntosh County, his wife and her boyfriend, and the police could have stopped that. They did not. They showed favoritism to Sergeant Sasser, and that happened. And we've had several other situations where the police have been involved in a drug bust, supposedly, that we went through Camden County all the way down to Fernandina, that did not work out. The car coming back, they chased the car was wrecked, and the individual in the car died a couple of days later in the hospital. That should have never happened. The police department, all the policemen there had on masks. That should have not happened. The sheriff in Camden County didn't know that they were coming through Camden County. And it's just been a fiasco with the police department for some time. And it's just time to put a stop to it.
And it won't be you putting a stop to it. The people of Glenn County will decide.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Senator Ligon, I'm going to open it up to questions from members of the committee, unless you have anything you want to add.
I would
before
like
that.
to add
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
You know, we just didn't bring this up on our own. In September of 2019, the grand jury submitted their presentment to Superior Court, which was approved by the Superior Court. And they specifically dealt with the issue of the Glenn County Police Department. And they listed a number of findings of events that they found concerning. They felt that there was effort to cover up some issues that had come up. They felt that there was a lack of cooperation with the GBI. In fact, during some of the court hearings in one of the cases, one of the officers testified that he would never cooperate with the GBI and instruct others not to do that. Ultimately, the problems there resulted in over 100 or somewhere around 100 criminal cases being dismissed, which should never have been dismissed. And the grand jury, in their findings, they said that it was the Board of Commissioners that were charged to supervise and hold the Glenn County Police accountable, that a lack of integrity leads to a lack of moral integrity, which undermines the perceived authority of our law enforcement, They felt that there was an ongoing culture of cover-up, failure to supervise, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability within the administration of the police department. Basically saying that the leadership was problematic and that there needs to be changed. And they specifically asked that the legislature look into this and put this on a ballot to allow the voters to make this change. And, you know, I just, you know, the grand jury is an important part of our system of governance and our jurisprudence. You can't even prosecute a felony in this state without basically their permission. And they have the authority to look in and supervise government. They're our oldest citizen watch group or government oversight group that we have. And they've made this recommendation. They were so serious about this that they called the legislative delegation in, and they made these
To the grand jury process?
No, not to present their report to us.
I got you.
And they wanted to make sure that we were clear and that we understood what they were saying. If they had questions, if we had questions, they were willing to ask, you know, to let us ask and just run through this to understand, to ensure that we had a clear understanding of what they were saying. And I could tell you, I did not feel that there was a more serious group, a group that was a better cross-section of our community than the members of that grand jury. We had attorneys with law enforcement experience. There were business owners, retired school teachers, just the best that our community has to offer.
Okay.
And so we took that seriously, and that's where this bill ultimately came from.
Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. The first thing I want to say is I absolutely am in support of what you're doing here, and I'm gonna vote for this measure. I understand the limiting nature of it because with the sunset, but even though it's sunset, it puts into our law a template or a precedent that could obviously be followed again down the road. And once we do it once, then it's a whole lot easier to do it again and again. And before we get to that point and put this precedent forward, can you just explain, and obviously I'm aware, everybody in this room is aware, and at this point, a lot of people in the country are aware of the issues that y'all have dealt with. And the one thing that I want to understand better is why does it, you know, you've got totally restocking. You have two options. One is to abolish a police department or firing everybody from top to bottom and starting over or whatever that may be, to try to reform that police department into an acceptable entity or institution. What is kind of the history been with that? And this is obviously, you know, abolishing it is the code red point. And if that is what y'all want and that is what your community wants, then I'm going to support that. But I want to know why we haven't looked to firing everybody and starting over.
I would like to know the answer to that question myself. If you're in the corporate world and your corporation, your leadership is making a series of mistakes and missteps, which is affecting the operations of that company, the board of directors comes in and they fire the president and other leadership. They bring in other people to change the culture of that company to turn it around. If you're in the military and your unit makes mistakes and is continually going down the wrong track, the commander is held accountable and a change is made. That unit receives retraining, restocking, whatever it needs to change the culture and so that it can perform its duties and the functions. I do not know why, and I cannot answer to you why there has not been that change, and it has not been swift and quickly. You know, I wish I had an answer.
What is the Board of Commissioners in Glenn County? I mean, where are they with this legislative effort?
They have. All right. I filed this bill the original bill, Senate Bill 317, on the first day of the legislative session, right at the very beginning. And there was immediate opposition to it. There were some discussions, and we said, okay, well, maybe, just maybe, they see that we filed a bill. This can be taken seriously. There can be some immediate, visible, clear reforms being made within the leadership of this department. And frankly, they had the grand jury report since September. And it was still, whatever was being done was moving at a snail's pace. So we decided, okay, we'll just back off. Maybe we have their attention. Maybe we'll see some reforms. And we moved this and filed a non-binding referendum. After that occurred and some period of time went by, there were indictments against the chief and 3 other leaders within the department. Then you had the Ahmaud Arbery case, and they were still in charge, and the decisions were made not to turn this over to the GBI, not to make immediate arrest. And, you know, that was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And just from statements that we saw that had been made by some of the county officials in public, we came to the realization, Representative Hogan and I, that there was a substantial likelihood that this was not going to really change. And like I said in my opening statement, we have been approached by countless people saying we would like to vote and there needs to be a change. And in fact, there were those, some officials that had initially opposed it and said, go back to a non-binding referendum, that came back and have said, I have changed my mind. I offer an apology to you for statements that I've made. I would like for you to proceed as you're doing now. So.
Do you have a way to gauge what, I mean, obviously a referendum, the results will be what they will be. How do you calculate or gauge what you think the pulse of the community is on that at this point right now?
I think that the pulse of our community is this: we're tired of problems and we want a change. And the thought is that, well, if we can elect our chief law enforcement officer, then he is going to be more accountable and responsive to concerns like this. After all, what candidate would run on the record that has been set over the last 3 to 4 years with the issues that have been had? It is not a winning platform. And so I believe that if this is put on the ballot, it will pass with overwhelming support from the people of Glenn County.
And so Mr. Chairman, may I keep asking questions?
Yeah, a little bit more.
Okay. You know what? I think I've asked all the questions I need to right now.
All right. Ms. Rich.
Thank you, Senator Ligon, for bringing this and for being so proactive. I just want to make sure that this is as limited as it can possibly be.
Yes.
I read the last line that there is a sunset, that it will be repealed by operation of law January 1, 2022.
Right.
Is that the absolute latest that it can be, or could we have an earlier date and still accomplish what you want?
We may be able to. I would have to talk with legislative council, but we need to have time for the transition to occur. And so the bill cannot sunset before then.
It can't sunset before the transition, or
before the transition occurs. And I think in our local bill, we may need at least until 180 days. Yes.
So as I understand the timing, it would be past this session. It has to be a general election referendum, which means 20 in November. And then you have to have 180 days after that.
That's
for it to go into effect, to allow for an orderly changeover. So now you're heading toward the middle of 21.
Okay.
Right.
And so we come back into session in 21,
Mhm.
but you can't have another general referendum on the ballot on the November ballot until 22.
Okay.
So the sunset is going to have it open for this session, and if the next legislature wants to make a change, they're going to have to do that.
Okay.
That is my
That's right.
understanding of it. Now I'm willing to be corrected, and if Ledge Counsel is up there and I stated something wrong, he can give me a thumbs down.
This was figured on election years instead of.
He says thumbs up. What's that?
calendar is election years.
That's correct. It's a November. If I understand binding referendums, they have to be on the November general election,
Right.
and you don't have one of those in 21.
That is our intention.
So that's
to
when
do
it
that way.
sunsets at January 1st, 22. You can't get to another general election unless the legislature passes another bill. Does that make sense, Mr. Wilson? Now that's my understanding, and Ledge Counsel gave me a thumbs up. So,
And that's if everything goes the way that it's supposed to.
well,
Right.
Is it-
they've got one shot at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the people of Glenn County, if this bill passes and signed by the governor, they'll have one shot.
Is there any harm to making it an earlier date? Or does it have to be?
And
in
no,
22?
I mean, you could make it August of 2021, I guess. But I mean, this is the way Ledge Counsel had prepared it, and I'd really kind of like to keep it that way because we know that
It works.
it works.
Mhm.
Okay, if Miss Deborah Nesbitt has, Walensky does. All right, Representative Walensky, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my mic off so we won't have feedback, and turn yours on.
Testing, can you hear me? Yes, all right. Thank you, Chair. Is this bill strictly for Glenn County?
And let me tell you my understanding of that, and then I'll let the senator correct. It is a statewide bill, Representative Lewinsky. However, because of the sunset date and the need to pass a local bill, and they've already got their local bill in the works and run their ad, in a practical effect, it could only possibly affect Glenn County, is my understanding of it. But I'll let the senator elaborate further on that.
You stated that accurately, Mr. Chairman.
Representative, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and we'll just
Oh,
follow up.
Give me a thumbs up, or if you want to talk some more, you're good. Okay. All right.
No,
Good.
no, I
Absolutely.
want to talk more. One more.
You don't have his, Representative Welch, you are number 7.
Senator, I've got just a few questions. How under current law would the police department a county police department be abolished? I mean, how would you,
The county commission would just abolish it.
and how?
If I may, that's our theory, because the current law
That's
doesn't
right,
address
that's
it.
really right.
This will be the first time you've actually
Right.
put into law a way to go let the people go back. So in theory, the county commission could address it, but we don't have law on that.
And how is a county police department put into existence?
It's put on, they would pass a resolution, then it goes to the voters and they would approve it.
So as I understand the current law is that a voter referendum is required to establish a county police department. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what you're asking for is the same thing in order as an exit strategy, if you will, of how to disband the county police department if it's unnecessary.
Right.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
And with the addition that this is actually only going to be in effect for 2 years.
Right.
Now, the way I read the bill is that while the local act may trigger a referendum, this thing would still authorize the resolution of a governing authority of a county to disband a county police department for the entirety that this act exists, which would be for the remainder of this year and all of next year. Is that
Right.
correct?
The county could do that. Yes.
But right now, currently, we don't know legally whether a county can ever rescind a police department and revert back to a sheriff's department, correct?
I specifically asked that question, Chairman Welch, and the theory was that they could, but we don't have that spelled out in law. So if someone challenged it, you might end up in front of a judge for an interpretation.
I do have a concern in that while this is directed specifically at Glenn County, and that's your intention, is that you are creating a window of opportunity for county commissioners across the state to disband police departments without a referendum. And I have concerns about that. I would rather, if the county commissioners wish to, and if, unless I'm reading it wrong, the resolution of the county, that would put it to the voters, correct, for a voter decision.
Well, I mean, if you look at subsection C, if such local act or resolution of the county governing authority is approved by the electors of the county. I mean, I think that the resolution of the county would have to be approved by the electors as well.
In 19 in line 20, if
Right.
such local act or resolution, the word resolution refers back to the power on 14 of the county commission to pass a resolution. So they'd have to pass a resolution, as I read it, to put something on the ballot.
And that's the question. So if maybe
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
well, maybe I'm misunderstanding. So it's possibly me because I'm reading this the first time right now. So I want to make sure I understand how it's going to work. What I'm getting at here, Senators, I don't want us to create a window that would allow for county commissioners to just start
Abolishing police department.
putting it on a ballot or abolishing police departments, unless that's what we want to do as a General Assembly across the state, because the window we're creating appears to me to be a little bit broader than just Glenn County. I know your local legislation says that, but if the Board of Commissioners can do it, if a Board of Commissioners can trigger the referendum, then is that something we want to approve, even if it is just for a year and a half?
Well-
And I want to understand the chairman's question. So we think right now that a board of commissioners could abolish a police department and turn it back over to the sheriff. In fact, they can do that by funding if they want to. If you send no money to the police department, zero, but you increase the sheriff's budget by $10 million, the
Right.
same amount, you've just done in effect that. And they can do that now by budgetary matter. The sheriff always has ability to arrest and carry out police powers in a county. He just doesn't have the funds and the resources to do it. So as a matter of law, you can do that right now. Now, the question would be, you by budget gave them zero, but you didn't technically abolish them. They just have no employees now. So it would still be there. The question you're asking is, could they, by a resolution of the county commission, instead of just completely defunding them and giving the money to the sheriff and telling them to go operate, abolish the police department? And I would say the answer is probably yes, they could do that right now. That would be the logical conclusion if I were a judge, because they are the people that created it in most instances. But if even though they could defund them and give the sheriff all the money and do exactly, if you don't want that, we probably could simply strike from this bill line 14 and some words in line 19 or thereabout and do a belt and suspenders, even though I think it's not going to change what you're asking.
Okay, well, I prefer so I'm just making sure I understand the bill, but
Right.
I actually prefer that the voters have a say in if they're going to vote to allow for a police department. I feel like they also should have the right to vote.
Under
to
this
remove
bill, they do.
Right, I know, but it's for that limited time. So I'm just asking
Right.
questions to understand.
Sure,
make I understand
absolutely.
the breadth of it. And if we do want to keep it narrow, then I like where Representative Rich was going with this in terms of maybe truncating the time that the act exists at all. And so is there magic to the 180 days?
Well, it was felt after discussion with.
Let's ask legislative counsel.
yes.
We banded that around a little bit and he gave me the thumbs up earlier, but you've asked it again. So, Mr. Talbert,
Yes, sir.
you're up there. I'm going to ask that your mic be turned on.
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? All right. I guess the question was about the 180 days. I wasn't the lead counsel that drafted this particular one originally. So I don't know if there's any magic to that. But I can check into it real quick and see, if there's some legal reason for it or not.
Counselor, I think the question is, Representative Welch is asking, could we change possibly on line 24, the word January 1st, 2022 to possibly September the 1st, 2022 or August the 1st, 2022? Did I state that question correctly?
Well, that would be a follow-up that I was going to have, but I was just wondering if the 180 days is material and you need the 180 days, then I just wanted to understand that. Otherwise, why not just do it in 30 days and then reduce this
Well,
back to a January 1st?
When I asked that same question,
Okay.
because I asked that, the answer was you need an orderly transfer of duties from the police department to the sheriff department. The sheriff has the power to hire and fire all his deputies, and he's literally going to hire 100 or more police officers. And a 6-month transition period would be an orderly time to do it. Now, when I asked that, that's the answer I got. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. And then it also, the other reason, going back to Chairman Reeves's question, it's occurred to me that when you are dissolving a police department, that the sheriff isn't financially and budgetarily geared up to suddenly become the law enforcement agency of the county. Typically, their budgets are smaller because they're not, although they legally can, they often are not performing a policing function when there is a county police department. Not that legally they can't, it's just that they aren't geared up that way. And so in making that transition, it would seem to me that you would need, if you zeroed out the budget, then you're creating a problem. If you didn't have an orderly transition, then you'd also create the problem that sheriffs would not be in a position to provide policing services to the entire county as the law currently contemplates. And so it makes sense that we have it. I'm just trying to make sure I understand if that number is 180 days is the number you need.
That's the number that speaking with sheriff's associations and others, that's a reasonable amount of time.
Good. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Ms. Nesbitt. She's looking at me. Senator, if you'll just go back there with where Representative Hogan is, there may be questions that come up. Ms. Nesbitt, the senator is going to move around and you come on up to the center spot here. Good to have you today. Tell me what that little side thing is on your mask. It looks fancy.
Oh, I'm supposed to have a filter or something in there.
Okay.
But I'm going to take it off finally.
No, a speaker, I've been telling all our witnesses, the
Yeah.
speaker said from the floor yesterday, if you're
We can
talking
talk
into a
in the
mic,
microphone.
you can take your
Thank you.
take your mask
Great.
off. Good to have you today. Go
Thank
ahead
you,
and
Mr. Chairman.
tell us who you're with and we'd be happy to hear from you.
I am Deborah Nesbitt, and I'm here representing Association of County Commissioners. First off, I'm not here to talk about Glenn County at all. We have a concern with the legislation because it's part of our inherent powers under the policing is one of our inherent powers under the Constitution. And this would appear to give the legislature the ability to have it end around the counties in abolishing a police department. The county commissioners are elected, and they are the ones that have the police department. And so there is a voter remedy there. Number one is that they could oust their county commissioners if they don't feel like have the proper controls on the police department. So again, our problem is the precedent that it sets. It could be a slippery slope for there to, but there's never been any legislation that was a run around our inherent powers under the Constitution. And so we're worried about setting that precedent. And to Chairman Welch's point, I don't think there are, but there could potentially be a county commission that wanted to get rid of their police department, but the sheriff doesn't want to take it on, or doesn't have the ability to take it on. And so within this window, they could do a resolution and just make the sheriff take on that responsibility. In some of these larger counties, the sheriffs don't have anything to do with enforcement. They're running the jail. And so really our issue is the precedent. It was our understanding that an agreement had been reached with the county commissioners and with Senator Ligon that they would do a referendum in the upcoming election. Now, I don't know if that went off the rails. I said I wasn't going to talk about Glenn County, and I'm not, because that's not really our issue. Our issue really is the precedent that it sets. Under the Constitution, we're not sure if it's constitutional for there to be an end around one of the inherent powers. So that's our concern. And that's why we're opposing the bill. It's not about what's going on in Glenn County at all. We try really hard not to get in local politics at ACCG or local bills. But again, to the point some have made, this is a general bill that affects all counties and all counties with police departments. And so that really is our issue.
Okay. Mr. Welch, you had a question?
The question is the bill does provide a mechanism for allowing the citizens to vote on whether a police department exists at a county level, continues to exist. And it's hard for me to say that isn't a right thing to do morally, because they've asked for it, to voted by referendum to establish the police department. You're allowing the people to vote on the issue of whether to decommission a police department.
That's correct.
With this measure, even though it is limited. To the point that you made about the voters voting on the commissioners themselves, I have in my 10 years of running for office, I've rarely found a single issue voter. Every one I've spoke to, they have issues that are extremely important to them, but they have other issues that are also important to them. And so oftentimes removal of an elected official based upon just one issue is not likely. And it's difficult to say that alone is the reason why voters would remove people, and for failure to remove a police, to disassemble a police department. There are lots of ways that we've talked about here that you can justify not putting it back to the voters. Oh, we'll take some managerial steps, which might be true. It might be platitudes. One person might be voted out of office, but not everyone, especially on a staggered terms. And so the issue loses its momentum when it's in such an abusive situation. And I think there is some concern that that in this particular instance that Senator Ligon is bringing to us is that we have a pattern and practice within this police department that isn't being remedied. And despite his efforts to try to ask for a local solution, that hasn't borne any fruit. And then how long do we need to wait until the next election of the Board of Commissioners, the next election cycle, and how many more people have to be abused during that period of time before the electors have that option to take action? Those are things that are legitimate concerns to me. And so I think that the measure is narrowly tailored to do that. I do share your concerns, but with respect to sheriff's departments, but ultimately this bill contemplates a very reasonable, I think, a gratuitous amount of time to make the transition, but it does allow for that.
I understand. And again, we are not weighing in on the Glenn County situation. We're just worried about the precedent that it sets.
I feel that tremendously.
Right. So that's really our biggest concern.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you for
appreciate you
allowing
being
me
here
to speak
today.
to the
All right. All right. The chair has no other witnesses lined up. The chair at this time would entertain a motion. There's a move to pass by Ms. Oliver. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Reeves. Any further discussion? Now, here's how, if no further discussion, here's how the chair intends to take the vote for those who are with us by Zoom. First, I'm going to ask for the vote like we normally would in this room, and then I'm going to turn y'all's mic or phones on, and I'll let you also vote, and the chair and the committee will evaluate how that works. All those in favor of the motion to pass, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There are none. Now the chair is going to turn his mics off and turn on the Zoom mics. For all those who would like to vote aye that are with us by Zoom, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Bill passes unanimously. Well, that worked fairly well, I hope. All right, you are off the rules, Representative Hogan and Senator Ligon. Senator Ligon, you got another bill, but we got one we're going to take up before that. And since we gave yours so much time yesterday. So it's Mr. Welch. He is so quick with everything he says. It may be a minute, so you might want to hang around. All right. Are you smiling? Okay, all right. All right, Chairman Welch, you have another bill which is a substitute for us, and I believe it is Senate Bill 442. Is that correct? Mr. Welch.
This is Senator Tippin's bill. What I've done is
Mr. Welch, I may have miscalled. I think I'm told it's 405. Is that right?
it's 405. Yes.
I apologize. Senate Bill 405.
Sorry.
Representative Welch.
So, as we all are all aware, we're the entire judiciary is struggling with the effective administration of justice while we are having to social distance and recognize the infectious rate of the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And so that has created an issue whereby it's hard to pull together and impanel juries across the state, especially there are certain areas where the courtroom and the courtroom facilities are actually very small. The jury and paneling rooms are also likewise small. And that means that it's harder to, of course, to gather that group of people to hold a trial, a jury trial. In speaking with a number of judges and with attorneys from PAC and GACTL and the Southern Center for Human Rights, as well as the plaintiff's bar and the defense bar, insurance defense bar, this streamline here, which this bill would allow for 6-person juries by consent in Superior Court, only by consent of both parties in Superior Court, which is the law, case law. It's what's been decided by the Supreme Court, but it's never been codified. But it would make clear that it would be by consent, and that would be for criminal actions in Superior Court. As for civil actions, that would also be an option in Superior Court. By consent of the parties, you could go to a 6-person jury. In state court, it's already constitutionally allowed for courts of lesser jurisdiction to have a 6-person jury. This measure would place in the discretion of a state court judge the ability to impanel a jury of less than 12, but not less than 6. Could be 6, could be 9. But it allows for that flexibility where local counsel can deliberate with the judge, discuss their constraints, and then proceed with a hearing. It is, by its drafting, intended to be, and by its drafting will only be effective for a year. So it would begin July 1st, run through June 30th of next year. And that way we hope that individuals will take advantage of this move to six panel jury and be able to hold those hearings where they need a finder of fact and they need decisions made by that finder of fact, and to move those cases along just for this next year while we were struggling with social distancing in the courthouse. And still we need cases to move. That's the summation of the purpose of the bill. And there are members that have come from PAC, GACTL, and others. I think I don't have the letter with me, but I know that GACTL and the Southern Center for Human Rights have submitted a letter of support for this measure. And PAC is also here to speak on the measure if you have questions. My understanding is that neither the plaintiff's bar or the insurance defense bars will speak, but they do support the measure, and I can represent that to you. And so those, I hope that gives you an overview of the bill, and I'll be happy to take any questions from members of the committee.
Okay. Representative Bruce, you had a question, correct? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. Representative Bruce, give me just 1 second, then I'm going to turn on your mic. Representative Bruce, go ahead. Representative Bruce, see if you make sure you have muted
I
yourself.
had to unmute myself. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. The the question I have is, what is the significance of the current jury size? You know, why was the number that it currently uses put in place? And if we change it, are we in some way diminishing the rights of whoever the defendant in these cases, especially if we say that it's okay to do it now, we're going to change it for a year and then put it back. The people that go to trial in the meantime, have we somehow, you know, done something to harm them?
That's a great question, Representative Bruce. And so let me answer it this way. I think the answer is no. And in terms of harm to them, because for two reasons. One, your first question was, where did the number 12 come from? It's in our Constitution. State Constitution prescribes a 12-person jury in Superior Court. It does also allow for the General Assembly to reduce that number only in courts of limited jurisdiction, which state court is a court of limited jurisdiction. So we already have codified in law 6-person juries. We allow that in state court. Under this particular provision, it would allow for 6-person juries by consent of the parties for amounts that exceed the $25,000 threshold. And it would also allow the judge to order it at his or her discretion, probably most likely based upon the limitations of the impaneling, the room to bring in enough jurors to select from. So we have to impanel a larger pool of jurors that then sit and wait. They're interviewed by the attorneys in what's called a voir dire, and then they're picked from that point. And then the jury is selected, and that's the jury that serves. But in order to bring in that larger pool, the larger number of jurors you have, the larger the pool has to be. And so in that regard, there will be conditions or situations where that smaller jury pool would be a better fit in that particular case. But that would only be in a state court case. It would be in a civil action. It would not be in a criminal action. And then it would be, and consent would be required in any criminal action. So both parties would have to consent to that in any Superior Court criminal action. I hope that answers your question. So if both parties consent and agree, then they can waive that 12-person jury right.
Yeah,
You good with that
yeah.
answer? You made thumbs up?
Yeah, for the most part, it does. I guess I'm just concerned that if we, and the concern is, that's just the only word I can think of.
Bruce, start over with your question.
I said, it answers for the most part, but my concern, and the word concern is only because I can't think of another word to use right now, is that, you know, if it's required now and we only saying this is going to last for a year, are we saying that what we're doing now is so relevant that we have to put it back in place a year from now? That's why I'm feeling that, or questioning whether or not the people who are in this 1 year interval, if somehow they are being, you know, hurt, you know, and I hear what you're saying, but if it's good enough, you know, for this year and people are not being hurt, why not just let it go on ad infinitum? You know,
Representative, let me give a shot at that. I think I understand what Representative Bruce is asking, and it is a good question. But one thing might be good to point out right now, that a current defendant in a criminal case already has the ability to have 0 people as a jury. They can have a judge trial, I believe, that the parties agree to. So the reason from going to 12 to 6 is not that we intend to do it for any other reason other than we're trying to accommodate the court system during a period of a pandemic. And courthouses across the state, from what I have been told, are literally sometimes not configured to have pettit juries, rooms large enough for proper social distancing. But if you cut that in half, then and ultimately end up with a 6-person jury, they could accomplish that. But the key thing to this totally is that the defendant is represented, they have counsel, they can already not have a jury, and this just simply would allow them to do that. I think those are fair questions, though, that you've asked, and a fair consideration. But that would be the reason why we're doing it now. If long term we wanted to move away from this, I think the first case I ever tried as a lawyer was in front of a 6-person jury because we have a strange creature in Augusta called a civil court that I think only Macon, Bibb County has one, and they have 6-person juries for civil matters. And so this does happen in other places. I will tell you very briefly, you asked the question, where does the 12-person jury originate? In about the year 1086, a guy named Norman the Conqueror invaded England. And he, when he did, he put his lords in charge of the country. But he told them, before you change the locals' custom, gather 12 of the elders in the community together, and you have to consult with them first. You don't have to do what they want you to do, but you have to talk to them. And that is the origination of our 12-person jury in our law, in our legal system. But nonetheless, Representative Bruce, do you have another question? If you do, give me a thumbs up. You're good. Representative Bruce is good. Okay. We have other questions on the committee. I think that would be Ms. Rich. No? Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Check. Am I good?
Okay. I apologize, y'all. Every time we switch to Zoom, I have to turn the volume way up and then I have to turn it back down.
All right, there.
There you go.
Chairman Welch, when would the when would the decision be made between the parties consenting? Would it be made the day of trial or sometime before then? When would that decision come?
The way I understand is that they would, normally you file for a jury trial and you ask for the jury trial, and then I presume that it would happen by the judge's organization of when he's going to call the case. As you know, when we get a calendar call, oftentimes that's the time when people are you're asked, well, how many days do you need for a trial? What's the scope of the issues that we're going to be dealing with? Let's set the calendar. And I would presume that the judges at that particular time would ask, all right, does anybody want to request a 6-person jury or a different number, 9-person if it's civil and state? And that person would make that request. And that would be the time frame I think would work in.
The concern I have, and this just may be one of those things that just has to be worked out in courtrooms, but obviously there's a lot of people in this room who've tried cases, and as we all know, being ready for trial is a big deal, and it's also a moving target. And I know that, particularly in criminal cases, I've been involved in more criminal trials and civil trials. When the state is ready, typically it's not good for the defendant when the state is ready. And by having, in a criminal case, if a defendant agrees whether it be a calendar call or some other time for a 6-person jury, and then the day of trial says, I've changed my mind, I want a 12-person jury, then are we creating, and vice versa, the state could make arguably the state can make the same argument. We want a 12-person jury. Then are we giving a reason to help a delay happen? And if we deprive the defendant, if the criminally accused defendant says he wants 12 instead of 6, then are we depriving him in some way that could come back on appeal. And I don't know the answers to these questions. That's why I'm asking it. And it's just something that I'm thinking through here, just having a lot of experience in the criminal and prosecution arena on this.
So the part of the answer, and not all of it, and I think that that individuals from PAC are here to probably field those questions as well. But part of that is that whenever anyone waives a constitutional right, they have to do it knowingly and voluntarily. And each judge goes through a series of questions of the defendant and his or her counsel to make sure that they are certain that the person is knowingly and voluntarily waiving that right. So this is a situation where the defendant, in your context, which would be the most problematic, in that worst case scenario, if you will, or the most one that may be ripe for a challenge, would be under the context of the judge, the defense counsel, and the defendant saying, I would like a 6-person jury. I would like my case tried quickly. I want a resolution to this case. I believe I'm innocent. And I want a trial, and I want to move forward with it quickly. And I can get that trial done so I can go on with the rest of my life as a free person, an acquitted person. And so I want the jury. So that may be a scenario. And then in that context, the judge has an affirmative duty to go through and ask that person questions to ensure that they voluntarily and knowingly waive that right to a 12-person jury. If at a later time that is, that the defendant changes his mind, I think each and every judge is going to have to make that decision for him or herself, probably reconfirming that before the voir dire, that this is the direction they're headed. That's an issue I can't really address in this bill, and I don't really want to hamstring either the defendant, defense counsel, or the judge from having those discussions. They're important discussions that they should have. All this would do is simply codify that they can consent. Both parties can consent in superior court to a smaller number in terms of the jury. And so it's up to the discretion of this body as to whether or not that's a prudent policy decision to make for a year's period of time. I think it is. I think it's important that defendants have as many options to relieve themselves of the burden of being prosecuted if they're indeed innocent. And I think that can be proven before a jury of 6 or 12. And that's a decision we would be codifying here.
Okay.
Representative Wilson.
I just wanted to thank you for bringing this bill and tell you I plan to support it. And share, just for the sake of the committee, an anecdote. I spoke with a Gwinnett County state court judge probably 2.5 weeks ago, who said that they've identified there's one large courtroom that they can fit 12 jurors in with social distancing. 17 judges are going to have to use that one courtroom. So so he said, you may ask or request a jury to be put on a jury calendar for my court, but then I have to go get in line to reserve the courtroom. And that is just going to add additional time as well. So I think this is going to do a lot to make sure that we're ensuring public safety, but also protecting legal rights and protecting constitutional rights as well.
Thank you.
Representative Bruce, did you still have a question? Give me a no. Okay. He says no. Okay. Your hand is still raised. You may want to turn that feature off. He did. Okay. Gotcha. Good. All right. We do have some folks, if there are no other questions. Yeah. Representative Dreyer? I'm sorry. You did tell me earlier. Let me, I think your microphone number 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Nope. Hold on one second. Try again. Touch it a little bit.
Test. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to take my mask off for a moment here. Kind of to Representative Bruce's point, and you actually just made that, Representative Welch. If I'm a defendant and I can't get a 12-person jury, I'm gonna push for a trial as fast as I can if I'm innocent. My law partner does criminal matters, and that is always his posture: file a speedy trial motion, and allowing a trial to go forward in the COVID circumstances is all this is doing, as long as both parties consent. So I would choose this option if I was a defendant. So I appreciate you bringing this, and I really appreciate all your work today. You make a big difference here. Thank you.
Judge Goggins.
Just one question. Would this also include probate courts?
No, sir, it did not, but Mary Margaret held up a sign. Says, why not probate courts? And I said, I'm sorry, Judge. I was thinking about it in the criminal context, and really because that's where the pressure, exactly what Representative Dry was saying, that's our biggest, because if you're Gwinnett County, you're gonna push through every single criminal case you can get through, because the defendant most likely has filed a speedy trial demand, and they're entitled to that. And constitutionally, we need to be able to provide them. And if that defendant wants 6 people to make that decision, then by all means, why not allow that to happen? And so, given that situation, Judge, that was my contact, that was my frame of it. And then you got the backlog of civil cases right behind them. And in Gwinnett County, I had heard that from Gwinnett County's perspective, if they tried to try all the criminal cases, they would consume every courtroom within the building, including the state court facilities, in order to make that happen. And so state court effectively would have to be relocated to even hold cases. So there's just not enough room to social distance, to interact, to have the panels. And it affords an option. And it's an option by consent of the parties. It's not going to be imposed, except in the case of a civil action in state court where a judge says, look, we got to move this case forward. It's been pending for years. We need to move this case forward in this particular civil action, not criminal, civil action. A judge may make a decision to push the parties forward into a smaller jury than 12.
Representative Rutledge, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If both parties agree, why wouldn't we consider doing this
Permanently?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can still do it. This would just codify it in order to make, I think, to make the public statement within the judicial community that that this is an option. You should strongly consider it.
But I thought this repeals.
It does. It has that language in it. If y'all next session decide that you think that
It worked well.
I'm just trying to be very cautious of this. So you can tell I've constrained it, because it may work great. And it may be something that judges come back and say, and the defense bar and the prosecutor's bar comes back and says, this worked well. We can strike out the expiration date. But I just didn't want to leave it out there permanently. It was just me being cautious. That's all. I'm just taking a cautious approach to it. It is an important matter, as Representative Bruce has pointed out. And so I'm just trying to be measured in what I put before this committee. That was my choice. It was a policy decision that I made in writing the bill.
Okay, I see no one else. And okay, we do have a couple of folks that wanted to testify. Jordan Reed. Is there a fellow named Jordan Reed? Ms. Silcox, do you see Jordan Reed out there, or someone that looks like him?
He got lost in the parking deck.
If not, tell Mr. Skandalakis to come in. Mr. Skandalakis? I know, I skipped him. Yeah, Mr. Reed is good. Good afternoon. Robert Smith. Good to see you, sir. You doing okay today? Good to have you. The speaker has told us if you're addressing the mic, you can take your mask off if you like.
All right,
Welcome, and please introduce yourself to the committee, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
thank you. My name is Robert Smith. I'm General Counsel at the Prosecuting Attorney's Council. And I've been asked and would like to speak to the bill. I think most of the comments and questions that have been asked, we agree with the responses. This is something that can already happen. This is just an encouragement to get things going. As our Chief Justice has said, we've got to be creative in how the system gets moving once again, and allowing, by consent of both the state and the defense, in a felony criminal trial, using a jury as only 6 members or anything less than 12 would allow us to be able to achieve that goal. And I'd ask for favorable consideration if you got, and answer any questions if there's any.
Okay. Chairman F. Stration, you would be number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Smith, just curious about this. Has it been contemplated that this would be used to negotiate certain terms for an ultimate trial? For instance, like a cap on a potential sentence, or to dismiss charges in order to expedite jury trials for taking place, an agreement between the parties for a jury trial to go forward?
I don't think it's been contemplated, because how I approach this is the same as the right for a defendant to testify on his own behalf, or be represented, or an indigent defendant to be represented by appointed counsel. It's a right that both sides hold. And while yes, some things can be negotiated away, I don't believe this is one of those rights that could be negotiated in that fashion.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any further questions in the room. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to have you today. That is everyone the chair has signed up to potentially speak to us on this measure. So we'll bring the bill back to the committee. Is there a motion? Ms. Silcox moves do pass. Second by Mr. Wilson. Any further discussion? Of course, the LC number that we have in front of us is LC 4802225S. LC 4802225S. Seeing no further discussion, all those in the committee room which wish to vote yes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Now I'll turn the microphones open for everybody on Zoom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The bill passes unanimously. On to rules. Thank you, Mr. Welch. All right, the last bill that we have on our agenda today is Senate Bill 442, which we heard extensively yesterday. Senator Ligon, you want to come back up? The LC number that I have for Senate Bill 442 should be the condition it left the committee yesterday, with 2 amendments by Mr. Welch that were adopted. That is LC 412570S. LC 412570S. So, having said that, I think when we adjourned yesterday, the chair was going to allow those for and against to have a little more time to talk, and then the committee would come back and make a decision whether or not we pass the bill. Senator Ligon, welcome again. We'll go back to you. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us in the last 24 hours that's occurred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are no changes, and certainly I would request no further changes to the bill. I think that the other 2 proposals really make the bill unworkable, and in particular the one that said that you would only have 90 days to fill a vacancy, or it reverts back to residential property. I mean, if you're doing renovations, there's some tragedy, you'd need to be able to have time to build it back, and then obviously put it on the market for rent. So I would just ask the committee to pass the bill as it was amended by the committee.
Ms. Rich?
I have just one possible suggestion, and that's to change the word sale to conveyance, just to capture.
What line?
On line 29.
Do you have a copy of it in front of you?
I do not have a
Can
copy.
we, Representative Welch, do you need another copy, Chairman Welch? You sure? Okay. on line 29, change the second word there from sale to conveyance.
To conveyance, yes, to capture all possible means by which the property could change or transfer, yeah.
Senator, did you have any comment on that
I
possible?
was just thinking about that. The only thing that I would say, the caveat would be, this might capture a situation where you have a restructuring of properties wanting to transfer some to one entity for, I guess, management purposes or other purposes that really,
I'm just
for that.
concerned with someone being able to abuse and circumvent the process with quitclaim deeds, for example. And that seemed to be the most straightforward way to address it. If somebody
Well,
has other suggestions, I'm open.
If consideration is given for the transaction, you're obligated under state law to pay a transfer tax, and failure to do so is a misdemeanor. It's a crime. And I mean, I'm sure that may happen from time to time, but I would. You just don't normally
Do we
see
have
that.
any dirt lawyers in the room?
You're looking at
do
a
you-
dirt lawyer. That's right.
Yeah. Let's stick with Ms. Representative Rich's question first of all. Representative Watts, did you have a comment on that? Okay, I'm gonna try now.
I would agree because with where she wants to go with this, and Senator, just because the conveyance can occur by the sale of a corporate entity to another corporate entity, so you may have it as an asset sale.
Right.
That would not be picked up necessarily as a per se sale because the corporations are being sold, the shares are being sold. So, so that individuals aren't gaming this what's intended to be a grandfathering provision, recognizing the rights of owner A that has it prior to this and is renting it out prior to this change in the law, then trying to game the text of the law by shifting the ownership through a corporate shell game effectively. That's I think the concern. And so the conveyance, I think, it broadens the scope of how the asset can be transferred, and then at least give someone, a homeowners association, a colorable argument to be made that that's not, that once that conveyance has occurred, the grandfathering should be lost.
Right. No, and I don't disagree with you that does not happen, and sometimes that does occur. I was just thinking more in terms of situations where you have a restructuring of assets within an entity that you want to shift some to one entity. There's really not a conveyance to parties that represent outside, use the word outside ownership. The ownership structure is really not changing. But I mean, it may be that if that's the way we need to go, I mean, we can use the word conveyance, but they'll just have to deal with that.
Representative Reeves, was your question to Ms. Rich's point? Okay, go ahead.
Kind of along those same lines, and we obviously have a very skilled ex-probate judge in here who's playing on his phone right now. So, but
He's looking up the
Judge
law.
Skog, yeah, he very well may be. So, I know that a lot of estates, in fact, I've been the lawyer for many estates that have had real estate that was investment property that was then passed down to the beneficiaries or heirs as investment property. And so how would this, and you know, an executor oftentimes has the ability to choose to either just sell a piece of real estate outright or can pass it along to the beneficiary as an investment property. And how would this impact that?
Well, I think that if you use the word conveyance, if the executor chose to transfer it to the heir, let's say a husband owned the property, he left everything to his wife. Upon his death, she transferred it to herself individually. It would no longer qualify as investment property if you use the word conveyance. But if you kept the word sale, then I think that she would be allowed to continue using that property as investment property.
Senator, I'm going to ask you to go to the seat behind you there. I have signed up Mr. Sam Owens, who was here yesterday, and I think I want to ask him to come in. He may want to touch on this issue for us. Bailiff Silcock sounded for you in the hall and did a great job. Mr. Owens, good to see you again today.
Good to see you, Chairman.
Thank you for coming. I want to hear from you, of course, but there was one question that was asked earlier about, do you have a copy of the, can we get another copy for the Attorney General of this bill?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. This is a question that we got touched on a little bit yesterday on line 29 on page 2 of the bill. This word sale there, the second word on line 29, whether or not that should be actually changed to conveyance. And I don't know if you were able to hear, but we had a little bit of discussion about that. And Mr. Reeves, you want to restate your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were talking about the word sale and potentially replacing it with the word conveyance, and doing a lot of probate work. What came to my mind is that if an estate or a trust owned investment property, which oftentimes they do, and if that property is passed to heirs or beneficiaries, would it, if it was a conveyance, then would that not allow it the protections that this seeks to offer it? And I think that, and I say that, but I also want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with where this started with Representative Rich, when she was essentially talking about the possibility of how you could quit claim deed property to and from and through shell companies to try to figure out a way to get around this and gamesmanship. So I think we have maybe trying to solve one problem might be creating another.
So Representative Reeves, I remember discussion on this yesterday too. And there is a concern because candidly, at times it is transferred to a trust. And candidly, at times it's transferred from one LLC to another LLC, not trying to in any way, shape, or form thwart the intent of the legislation. But in the normal course of business, some companies will send it to a trust or from one LLC to another LLC. I think the issue is if there's a sale to an unrelated party, that is a totally different situation than if it's to a trust or another LLC. I'm not a wordsmith with regard to legislation, but no one's trying to get around the situation for an actual sale to an unrelated party. But if it is a transfer to a trust or a related LLC, then I would suggest the lease ought to be continued. That should not be a violation of the grandfathering. But where it's an outright sale, I think that is a different situation.
Good question.
What about quit claiming it from yourself to your friend?
Hold on 1 second. We'll make sure we don't have some technical difficulties here. I see Julius moving, so he's still on with us. Okay. Evan Myers, our attorney for the committee here, is much younger than me, so he's giving technical advice. There we go. That if we wait just a second, it'll work. When I started practicing law, you were told to unplug it and plug it back up.
Still works.
Still works. Okay. All right.
Leave it unplugged for 10 seconds.
I apologize. Representative Reeves, go ahead.
I probably lost my train of thought, Chairman.
Okay, we'll move past you then.
You've been waiting all week to say that, hadn't you? Again, what about just simply quit claiming it to somebody else, your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, your child? I mean, is that
That's not intended.
Mhm.
I think it's literally when it's a trust or an affiliated LLC. I understand you're looking at ways it can be abused.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's not the intent here.
Mhm. I understand it's not the intent, but have we safeguarded it that it's secure from those types of abuse? I think that's what my concern is.
I would defer to Evan candidly if there's some standard or potential language that is often used that relates to affiliated as compared to.
The chairman was occupying the attorney's time. Restate the question, please.
I'm not sure what the correct wording would be, as I mentioned earlier.
We're still talking about changing sale to conveyance.
Yeah, because the question is affiliated versus unaffiliated, frankly, more than that other issue.
There's a famous real estate lawyer sitting in the back, Whip Kelly, and he's going to comment on this. So we're going to give him the
That would be
mic.
great.
Speaking to your mic there.
I was thinking through maybe Julius could help us, but I've been playing around with the ideas. We were kind of all talking on the back row, either something that says for value conveyance or possibly an arm's length conveyance.
So, Julius, what I'm going to do is turn on your mic in case you have a comment. So give me just 1 second here to turn everybody else's off as we make this transition.
Okay, so it sounds as though we're going to have to do a definition of unaffiliated or unrelated party. And I guess we are speaking both in terms of an actual person, but also in terms of like, I guess, an unrelated LLC and that type of thing. So I guess I would need to know what kind of unrelated parties are we talking about here? I guess is what help me.
If there's going to be any, I apologize. If there's going to be any additional testimony, I'd frankly like the ability to potentially talk to the client for a couple minutes and see whether we could come up with language that would solve that concern, rather than me just saying something at the.
What we'll do is that we have another witness. So
Okay.
there'll be a moment for you to do that and for us to possibly come back to this. I won't guarantee all of you that I will always be able to do this if you text me a question, but Representative Lewinsky texted me a question, and if I see it, I'll try to ask it. And he wants to ask you, Mr. Attorney General, can you ask for me if a person gets this grandfathering and they sell, does the purchaser still get to rent? Is there something in this bill that would stop the grandfathering when it is sold? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes, that was the intent.
The whole
of what was
intent, yeah.
discussed yesterday.
Yeah, basically. So the
Yes.
answer to that would be yes. We all agree, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, Representative Lewinsky.
And I already did get an email from the Associate General Counsel, but I'd frankly like to make a call
Absolutely,
to make
sure,
sure I understand
sure.
the email. But I think where Julius was headed was the right place.
Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the point of the policy, I'm going to step back, and what we're doing is we're saying currently, if a homeowners association amended its policies and said that rentals were no longer allowed, and your contention is that the case law has since changed from the 09 decision to the 18 decision.
Yes, sir.
And now there's question in the law, which then that doesn't help you because it creates uncertainty. And with this passage, what we're doing is trying to create certainty as to what's grandfathered and to what extent.
Yes, sir.
In that context, the point of covenants is to protect the property ownership of everybody else in the community from someone abusing the community's trust in how land use, how each parcel will be used. And so I come back from the perspective of what are we talking about here? We're talking about covenants. which protect property ownership, protect property values. And if a community feels like that rentals within their community is not beneficial to their property values, it is not consistent with the asset that they purchased and that they're paying on every month for a mortgage, then I would want us to be more restrictive and protective of those individuals that bought into the community, not less restrictive. And conveyance is more restrictive. Sale is less restrictive, as we just bantered around the table. So I'm coming from the perspective of what is the function of a covenant? What's it supposed to do? Why do we have them? And why would a community have them imposed? And then why would you move forward with them? And I would prefer us to be more narrowly tailored in our exemption than broader. That's my policy concern. That's why I'm agreeing with Representative Rich on that change. So I just wanted to express that bigger context, since we're delving deeper and deeper into vocabulary and definitions. I wanted to pull back. So that's all.
I would simply, I still need to make the call if possible, Representative, but I did have the occasion to talk to Representative Wilson earlier today and discuss with him the 09 case versus the 18 case. And we had a good discussion at that time. And frankly, with the change in the law, 2/3 of the homeowners now get to dictate to the other 1/3, which was never envisioned when the law was originally passed for homeowner associations in our state. And that's clearly changed the balancing test here. I don't have a big concern, candidly, between the word sale or conveyance. So to the extent that narrows it from your perspective, my concern is more that the restriction that we're talking about actually meet the desire of some members of this committee.
Right.
So if I could possibly be excused for a couple minutes.
Chair sees no further questions at this time, so please do. And
Thank you.
when you go out, would you ask Mr. Jeff Ledford to come
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mr. Ledford, good to have you today. Welcome. Come on and introduce yourself. Tell us who you're with, and we'd be happy to hear from you about House Bill 442. I will tell you, and you've already done it, you're welcome to take your mask off, addressing the microphone. Tell us who you are and welcome.
Hi, Jeff Ledford. I'm here representing the Realtors, and we have been supportive of of Senate Bill 442, and are here basically to speak to two concerns with it. One is the private property rights, being able to continue what you have been doing with the property. The other side of this is we are in the midst of a shortage of workforce housing, and this addresses some of those needs by being able to provide people housing, and again, it's not the manner in which they're there through a leasehold or through just outright ownership, but it's, the fact that they have a place that they can afford to live in. So,
okay. All
I'm
right.
happy to take any questions where we stand on it.
Chair sees no questions. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. If you would ask Mr. Olens if he's ready to come back in the room, we'd appreciate it. Or actually, Mr. Elmer Stansel, if you'll ask Mr. Stansel, he signed up too. Wonder if he heard me. I'm about to find out. I try to use the bailiff only when necessary. Tell you what we'll do. Mr. Stansel, did you want us to hear from you today? Good. Representative Washburn, you intend to carry this bill on the floor of the House if it makes it out of the committee and rules. Is that correct? How long have you been a realtor? Do you want to say anything before to give Mr. Olens some time to make his phone call?
No, sir, other than, obviously, I believe it is fair to grandfather
present homeowners in this bill, which is the intention to protect them and to allow them the benefit of being able to lease a property when they bought it under that circumstance.
Okay.
I know that's been stated repeatedly, so.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, sir. You want to check with Mr. Owens, see if he's ready to talk to us again? Other than that, the chair has nobody signed up, so we're about to wrap it up here shortly. Senator Ligon, you want to come up? Come on back to the witness stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
Just sitting back there listening and thinking, and I was thinking that maybe we could use the term conveyance for value and then define what a conveyance for value would mean. And that would be a transfer of the property for one person or entity to another for any consideration, or it could be a transfer of ownership of the entity which owns the property for any conveyance. Because that's usually the workaround. You're selling the stock or the membership interest of the LLC in the property.
Mr. Welter, Ms. Rich, you are welcome to ask Senator Ligon to repeat that slowly if you want to write it down for a possible amendment later. Hold on one,
Right.
hold on
Well,
one
I
second.
was-
Hold
okay.
on 1 second. Okay. Representative Rich?
Yes, I think that sounds like an efficient solution to accomplish the
Okay.
goal, but I didn't get the
Okay.
definition of conveyance for value.
Okay, well, we could, and I may need a little help here, but change the word sale to conveyance for value. And then we define conveyance for value as any transfer of the property for consideration or transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the property for consideration.
Say that again. and,
Transfer.
Start over with that definition so that
Okay.
Ms. Rich can write that down. Then I'm going to go to Legislative Council and ask if she were to offer it as an amendment where we would put it in how. So I'll be coming to you, Mr. Tallman, in just a minute. Say it
Okay.
again, please.
Consideration would be a transfer of the property for value or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the property for value. How was that?
The question I'm going to ask you, Mr. Dahlberg, is that if we did that, could we put a sentence at the end of line 29 which said, for the purpose of this subsection, comma, the term conveyance for value shall mean, and then you would complete that sentence with the words that were given by Senator Ligon and written down by my able scribe, Representative Rich over here. And that's going to be my question for you. So give me just a second and I'm going to turn off these.
Can you hear me? All right. Yeah, that works. So basically we would strike sale and use conveyance for value. And then at the end, we would add a definition saying, as used in this sub paragraph, the term conveyance for value shall mean any transfer of property for consideration or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the property for value.
All right, hold on a second. Council, give us that one more time.
Okay, and I might have incorrectly heard, but the definition I have is conveyance for value means any transfer of the property for consideration or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the property for value.
Use value. I'm sorry. We should either use value or consideration for both. In both
Okay.
instances, I think we use one for one and one for the other. consideration.
Did you get that, legislative counsel?
Yes, so it'll be any transfer of the property for value or consideration, or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the property for value or consideration, correct?
Did legislative counsel repeat that as far as you're concerned, correct? Then I'm gonna go to Chairman Welch.
Mr. Chairman, can we, just to be consistent with the current statutory language, instead of property, can we use the word lot?
Mr. Talbot, did you get that?
I got it. Yeah, lot. Okay,
Read it back to us now.
sure. Any transfer of the lot for value or consideration, or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the lot for value or consideration.
And that begins with, for the purposes of this paragraph, give us the full sentence.
Correct. What we'll do is strike on line 29, strike sale, and replace that term with conveyance for value. And then at the end of this sentence, we would add a sentence which says, for purposes of this sub-paragraph, the term conveyance for value shall mean, or the term conveyance for value means any transfer of the lot for value or consideration, or a transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the lot for value or consideration.
What the chair intends to do is, we ask Mr. Olens to go out and answer a question for us. I intend to bring him back up. And Representative Reeves, did you want to comment on everything we're talking about now? Go ahead.
I'll defer to the wisdom of the folks in this room that have done more real estate law than myself, but do we need to qualify value so that it isn't $10 or $100? I mean, do we need to? And I am thinking out loud, but again, trying to figure out ways that folks could be creative to try to get around this. And $10 is consideration. So I don't know if there's a way I don't know if fair market value is the right term, because that's kind of a objective thing. But I again, in the spirit of trying to prevent abuse, I think value is a little too broad.
Senator Ligon?
I would like to hear from
Mr. Olens. Did you want to comment on Representative Reeves's thought there?
Yeah.
Representative Welch?
I thought the consideration was broader, actually, because anything that's transferred for value, what may be consideration to me may not be consideration to someone else. But if I've accepted a transfer, it has to be in order for it to be a binding contract based upon consideration, unless it's a gift. And then the gift, I think, it addresses Representative Chairman Reeves's concerns about
estates and trusts.
So to me, that's kind of solved the problem that Representative Chairman Rich and I had, and then, but also not so exclusive as to not address the concerns you had. So I thought that was a good middle ground that you came up with. So I don't know that we need for value. Consideration seemed to be perfectly fine with me.
And is within the concept of consideration, how do we make that? Again, how do we work around the potential abuse for $100 of consideration or whatever it may be? I mean, if two parties consider the transaction exchange to be consideration, then that may be good enough for the eyes of the law. And so again, I'm just trying to.
So the way the whole structure is worded is that no amendment would affect them. And you can continue to own and rent your property, the lot, indefinitely. But But once you have a transfer where the lot is conveyed for value as we're defining it, which means that some form of consideration was given, whatever that was, it has to be in order to transfer the property unless it's a deed of gift. If any consideration was given, whether $1, $10, $5, used car, then that would nullify the grandfather.
Okay.
So
it doesn't, yeah, I think I'm looking at it backwards.
Yeah.
Is what I'm doing right now. I'm looking at it backwards. So that actually makes a lot of sense.
The chair had forgotten how titillating property law was in the first year of law school until this discussion today.
Clearly, we all have, except
Yeah.
for Chairman Welch.
Okay. Mr. Owens, I'm going to attempt to turn on mic number 9, which you can stay there, Senator. See if that mic's on, Mr. Owens.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern that was just frankly enunciated is generally whenever there's a deed transfer, it says for good and valuable consideration, even if there's none. So when you transfer to your relative, you use the same language as when it's a real sale. So I think the issue here is pecuniary versus non-pecuniary. And one thing I might suggest, and we're okay, Representative Welch, of course, with your term conveyance as compared to sale. But one way, and I'm talking out loud here again, would be simply, other than changing the word sale to convenience, at the very end saying, unless it is to a commonly controlled entity. Because what we're dealing with here, for instance, like LLCs, is we're trying to stop the play that Representative Reeves was potentially talking about. If it's a commonly controlled entity, shared ownership, common ownership, then the grandfathering should remain. And when you're dealing with trust, when you're dealing with the LLCs within a set of owners, it should remain. You're talking about an arm's length transaction, and that the grandfathering should be eliminated at that time. So it seems to me that one easy way may be simply to say, where you say shall be made to conform to the instrument as amended, unless it is to a commonly controlled entity, because that's the exception one is seeking, rather than the concern Representative Reeves is expressing, which is frankly far broader.
Senator?
The only thing I know, going back to Representative Reeves' concerns, that might not include transfer to the beneficiary of an estate. And you may have to include a statement that would include that as well.
Or a trust.
Or a trust.
Mm-hmm. That would be fine.
So we have discussed at length a proposed amendment. When we get to that point, if someone is going to change that proposed amendment that Representative Rich has written down, you need to make a case to her now or someone else on the committee at that point. The chair is certainly willing to allow you to do that now. Mr. Owens, did you hear the prior amendment that was discussed in the room?
The one by Senator Ligon?
Well, it would be possibly by
No,
Representative
understood.
Rich.
Yeah. Candidly, I thought with the senator's best intentions, I thought the word consideration was frankly creating several problems among members of the committee. If given the flexibility, I would literally say, other than changing the word sale to conveyance, I would simply say, after the word amended, unless it is conveyed to a commonly controlled entity or trust.
And make no more changes.
And make no more changes.
Representative Rich, did you have any questions about that?
I think that still does not address the beneficiary in an estate.
Or you get to just add the word or beneficiary of an
Okay.
estate.
Right, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Representative Rich, are you indicating that you like Mr. Owens' change better if you add those phrases at the end?
I think it probably accomplishes the same things, but with fewer words, unless somebody else sees.
The whip, who is
a
an
problem.
expert in real estate, we've already established, shaking his head that he agrees with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wondered if it says somebody on the beneficiary of a state, if we said.
Number.
Say, transfer by testamentary deed. We are, it may just work a beneficiary of the estate.
The spiral cycle of judiciary.
Well, what about when it's something, it transfers by operation of law because that property is held as joint tenants with right of survivorship? Would it capture that? Because I would.
What if a couple owns it and it's ordered in a divorce?
Or what if they're tenants in covenant?
Yeah.
So here's where we are.
We need a law professor to come.
Yeah.
Property professor.
Yeah, it's not property.
So here's where we are. Mr. Welch, go ahead and add to the confusion if you would.
I think the question in my mind is just simply, the proposal that our AG has proposed would allow for the transfer within corporations and subcorporations that where the common interest exists. So if you desire, in my mind, to continue or perpetuate the rental of property in a community that has voted to amend its covenants to preclude that, then you would want to vote for what AG Owens has said. If you are of the mind that it needs to be limited to the person that has the right at the time the amendment is made, and then not allow it to perpetuate and continue outside of that ownership at the time, then I think actually Senator Liggins' proposal accomplishes that very neatly and tightly. That's how I see the two structures here. So that's that, and I'm inclined to support Senator Liggins' proposal because I think that accomplishes a narrower construction of the covenants. Although I know that that's not what AG Owens would like us to do. So I respect that, but I'm of the posture that covenants are there to protect both the purchase of the property, knowingly purchasing the property with the covenants. You rent the property knowing the covenants are there. If the covenants are amended, you also understand that that they're going to be subject to them going forward if you sell the property.
So here's where we are. The chair is going to entertain a potential motion here in a second. Do pass, I assume, because that way we get to amendments. And then I'm going to let the body talk about the amendments that they may or may not want. And because we've had a good discussion, I will allow you to ask questions of Mr. Owens if you so desire, or Senator Liggin for that matter. So is there a motion regarding the committee substitute LC 412570? There's a motion do pass by Chairman Welch. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Representative Rutledge. Okay. Now we are in the posture of potential amendments. The chair would certainly entertain an amendment if Representative Rich.
Yes, this is the first time I've done this, so you're going to have to walk me through this.
Okay.
Procedurally, I do propose an amendment.
Okay. Read it to us.
Okay, I propose that the amendment
And
begins.
is this going to be the same one that the Legislative Council gave us?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I propose that the amendment begin on line 29, change the word sale to conveyance. And I would say of such lot.
Of such lot.
Mhm.
Okay.
Add the word of.
So you're going to change sale
Conveyance
to
of.
conveyance and then of such
Mhm.
lot. Okay.
And then at the end of line 29, add another sentence that reads as follows. For purposes of this subparagraph, actually, that was supposed to be conveyance for value.
I'll start over with a new
Yes.
sentence.
Okay, so beginning on line 29,
Mm-hmm.
taking out the word sale
Mm-hmm.
and add the words conveyance
Of. No.
of such lot for value.
You're changing.
or
the word.
conveyance for value of such lot.
Okay. All right. And then you got a sentence you want to add at the end of line
Yes.
29. Go ahead and
End
tell
of
us
line
that.
29, add the following. For purposes of this subparagraph, conveyance for value shall mean any transfer of the lot for consideration or transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the lot for consideration.
Okay. First of all, is there a second? There's a second. Legislative Council, if you got that, just give me a thumbs up. Nope.
Nope.
All right, hold on. We're going to go to Legislative Council. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn his mic on.
Okay, now I just needed to have repeated the last part about the wording for the definition.
Okay, for purposes of this subparagraph, conveyance for value shall mean any transfer of the lot for consideration or transfer of an interest in the entity that owns the lot for consideration.
Okay, so for purposes of this subparagraph, the term conveyance for value means any transfer of the lot for consideration or transfer of an interest in the entity that owns the lot for consideration.
She said correct.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second on that amendment. Discussion. Let's sit down at that mic if you want to, Mr. Webb. You pick which one you want. Okay.
Still have a concern. I still have a concern that that may include court order transfers and transfers necessary to effectuate a probate estate.
Okay. Ms. Rich?
Because every one of those deeds will have the recitation of for good and valuable consideration. It will be in the deed.
Ms. Rich?
That is a good point. So maybe we address that by adding yet another line that states what this does not include.
Well, so you would take the amendment, Mr. Whip, that she has now, but you would add another line to it to further.
Can I hear the last sentence one more time?
You have it, Representative Rich?
Yes, I do.
Can I come and just look over
Yeah.
over your shoulder?
For purposes of this subparagraph. Transfer. Yeah, I see what you're.
I again wonder if we put in something that says any arm's length transfer.
You would need to give us words.
Right. I think you read off and I'll tell you where I think to put it in.
Okay. Any transfer of the lot for consideration or transfer of an interest in the entity which owns the lot for consideration. So you would want to say
Any transfer through an arm's length transaction.
Do you know where that would go?
Yeah, right. Where it just says any transfer now, both places.
So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to include any transfers as part of a divorce?
I'm trying to exclude them.
Okay. So
Senator?
In our statutes, we require the payment of a transfer tax. And the payment of the transfer tax is made when the consideration is for anything over $100. And so you could say when a transfer tax is paid pursuant to OCGA 48-6-1, or when the consideration given is for more than $100. Actually, that might be better, because that would also take into account the situation where an interest in an entity is transferred from one person to another.
Mr. Whip?
I'm okay with that.
All right. Do you know the words that we would
I would
give?
just add at the very, very end, I'm thinking, if I'm remembering correctly, Representative Rich's amendment, where the consideration exceeds $100.
You got it, Mr. Welch? All right. Here's what we're going to do. Mr. Welch, the amendment that the senator has suggested that one of us may make a motion to adopt, is it going to be a new sentence or in the middle of the old amendment?
Middle of the old.
Okay. I think here's what the chair would rather do. I would like to adopt the amendment that is on the table. And then if you want to amend it further, chair will allow that. So with the understanding that Representative Welch apparently is going to make another amendment that satisfies the whip's concerns, the chair intends to call the question on the amendment which is on the table unless there's further discussion. Is there any objection to the amendment that is on the table that Representative Rich has put forward to us? Chair sees no thumbs down on the screen. That amendment is adopted. Now, Mr. Welch, you would like to make an additional amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, after the word consideration, add in the amount of $100 or more in both places.
Okay. Now I'm going to go legislative council.
Got it.
Representative Rich, did you have something?
I do. I wonder if we should use the code section, because then if that code section gets changed, it will update this code section without having to amend
Senator?
it. No.
If I could say,
Senator?
you could, but by doing that, you are removing what you were concerned about from the equation of one transferring of an interest in entity from one person to
Okay.
another.
Okay.
In other words, it would be a problem for a future judiciary committee to deal with.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. We can't solve all the problems in one day. Why would we ever return? So, all right, legislative council, I'm going to change the mics and ask if you got Representative Welch's amendment and understand it.
I believe I do. Let me read it back to make sure. So the sentence at the end of line 29, the sentence that we are amending to go at the end of line 29 will read, for purposes of this subparagraph, the term conveyance for value means any transfer of the lot for consideration in the amount of $100 or more, or transfer of an interest in the entity that owns the lot for consideration in the amount of $100 or more.
Representative Welch says that is correct. Is there a second to the Welch amendment then? There's a second by Mr. Whip. Any discussion? If there is no discussion, is there objection to the Welch amendment? Legislative council, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I did not.
You can say, give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down. You want to say something? Okay,
No.
he's good. There is no objection. That amendment is in. Now, is there any further amendments to LC 412570S for Senate Bill 442? If not, there is a motion to pass by committee substitute. Any further discussion from the committee? All those in favor say aye. All right, and we'll turn on the audio for our Zoom people. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Bill passes the rules. The chairs, as far as announcements are concerned. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Silcox, did you have something?
You didn't call for notice.
The chair apologizes. We're going to do that again. We're going to start over. Okay. My apologies. All those in favor of do pass by committee substitute, please indicate by saying aye. Now I'm going to turn on the audio. All those on Zoom, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
In the committee, and I think that was both of them. So in the committee room, all those opposed, please indicate by saying no. Okay. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes clearly have it. Does anyone desire a hand vote? Hearing none, the bill is passed on the rules. Okay. The chair will tell you that the chair intends at this point to have another committee meeting tomorrow upon adjournment. We have a couple more Senate bills that we may consider. There's a bill by Senator Stone that dealt with garnishments. There's a bill by Senator Thompson that dealt with a safe harbor for computer hacking and how that is handled under our law. The chair has not fully decided that we will hear those two tomorrow, but I'll just give you fair warning that we might. And once again, the chair intends to do it upon adjournment. So anything else for the good of the committee? We stand adjourned.